the best website to visualize and obtain macro level data is from Fred. Fred is the Federal Reserve Economic Data. It's hosted and provided by the St. Louis Federal Reserve. You can come in here and search for things such as, I don't know, real, and it'll give you a bunch of options or whatever, or GDP, or whatever. And the cool thing about this website is it shows you what you're looking for. And what we're going to look at for right now is unemployment. See, you have all the charts, you have the years, you have what the graphs axes are labeled as and what they're measuring, counting years, obviously time. Here they're counting the number of people that are unemployed. And it's cool because you can edit these graphs. So you can engage with the information on there and get a better understanding of what's going on, such as total net worth held by different wealth groups within the US, or even their percentages. So you can do them relating with each other and measuring and counting the same thing. But you can also do it with information that don't necessarily show the exact same thing. You just come in here, you add a line, and we're going to add real median in household income in the US. You select your option, and then you click Add Data Series. Obviously, the graph looks a little bit wonky and funky and doesn't really show the information properly. So what you have to do there is you format them. You can change the color, all these other information, width. But what we want to do here is make our new line on the right side. So that's nice, but it's not perfect yet. So we're going to go down here and we're going to adjust the years to right about there where we start collecting information. Now we have a really pretty graph where we can visualize something in economics we call supply and demand. You have the supply right here with the S, demand here. Here we're showing a shift in the demand in this particular graph. And you can see this shift in demand right here in the 2008 recession. So we have wages in the pink that are super high up, and then they start going down, down, down because unemployment goes up. We have an increased supply of people who need jobs. And because more people need jobs, they're willing to work for less. So we watch the actual amount people are making go down. Okay? Now let's do this with another one. Not necessarily focusing on unemployment, but we're going to go to the housing market. So here we have the 30-year fixed rate of mortgage for the average in the United States. And then we have SP, CoreLogic, Case-Shiller, U.S. National Home Price Index. Here's our index here that we're using. And this index is based on the price of a house in January. Right there, you can see. It's marked at 100. So the price of a house in January, just like average in general across the U.S., was 100. And in the Minnesota, the average price of a house then was $122,400. So that's our 100 mark. That's the amount of value for in Minnesota. You can do your own state or place or however you want to do it. And now we're looking at, okay, come on. It's not perfect. Oh, I bumped the mouse. It's not perfect, but it does show information pretty nicely. So the average cost of a house in Minnesota now is $324.224. About, 300.25, well, 325% the cost it was back in 2000. So in Minnesota, you're looking at the house price average of being $396,000, basically 400K. And it's important witnessing these things and understanding what we're looking at, because if you notice, house prices have shot up and they're not going down. But what's interesting here is the interest, because we have relatively high interest, but then coming in, 2018 here, middle of Trump's presidency, the economy's doing good, people are making money, they're doing great. They got, a lot of wealth. A lot of wealth. People are making a lot of money here in the household. So they're like, yeah, I want to buy a house. And since these people are buying houses, there's an increased amount of loans and mortgages in the housing market, which drives down the interest rate. And then we have 2020 come along, and interest rates are incredibly low right now. People are getting a bunch of extra cash. So those who are still working and are doing well are like, well, shoot, we're going to go buy a house. And it just drops the interest rate incredibly. And prices then skyrocket like no other. And this is important because now we don't seem to have as many people taking out loans on houses and buying homes and taking on debt for it. So the interest rates have shot up drastically because there isn't this influx of increased debt being taken out. One of the reasons we had this happen was, of course, Biden. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, is improving the lives of families and communities across the country over the past 4 years under the leadership of Joe Biden. Blah, 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 blah. HUD has made homeownership more attainable, boosted the supply of affordable homes, expanded rental assistance, helped communities recover from disaster, and ensure that the affordable housing stock is climate change, homeless people, helping out the impoverished people of color. Oh, glorious. Over the past 4 years, HUD helped more than 2.3 million people buy their first home. Oh, and serve more than 1.2 million borrowers of color. The diversity of it all, the gloriousness of it all, helping out those poor, impoverished people of color. And even more importantly here, drove near record construction with 1.7 million new housing units built in 2022. Oh, so that's why. That is why the housing prices aren't going down, because a bunch of new places, especially apartment complex, you go to any metropolitan area and you see apartment complexes all over the place. Wherever they can squeeze one of those ugly, dystopic looking buildings in, they'll shove it in there, and they'll shove as many refugees and Section 8 housers in there as livingly possible, and then some. So housing prices aren't going down because a ton of new homes were built in this span of time. But if you're a homeowner or you're looking at being one during that time, you would know the price of building a house, especially now, is ridiculously expensive. All the necessary goods and materials to construct the house, especially wood, are incredibly inflated. So we're making houses with inflated goods, which then itself is inflating the value of all these homes, along with this initial drive demanding all these homes, causing more homes to be built, but now we don't have people getting them. Can the U.S. climb out of its unprecedented housing crisis? The 2024 housing market was the slowest in decades. Next year's might not be better. It may come down to how many new homes can be built. Just keep building, just keep building. It'll fix the problem eventually, right? If we just overinflow the supply in the market, but there is no demand for it. What this is called is an economic bubble. Who would have known? An economic bubble, speculative bubble, financial bubble is a period when current asset prices greatly exceed their intrinsic valuation, being the valuation that the underlying long-term fundamentals justify. Bubbles can be caused by overly optimistic projections about the scale and sustainability of growth. An overly optimistic projection of scalability and growth. We have so much demand. Build, 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 build all these houses. Build them all. Drive up the value, drive up the price. Kind of like a wealthy person moving in like a poorer neighborhood. It increases the value of the surrounding properties. Or the opposite of poor people moving into wealthy areas. But so we don't have people taking out these loans. And now we have all these new houses built that people can't afford, or even old houses at this point. Because the interest rate has shot up because people stopped buying properties. People stopped, looking into buying a house because, like, I got a house. The market dwindled, and we had this optimistic amount of growth. So now we have ridiculously high prices. And this reminds me of something that happened not too long ago. The American subprime mortgage crisis was a multinational financial crisis that occurred between 2007 and 2010 that contributed to the 2007-2008 global financial crisis. The crisis led to severe economic recessions, with millions losing their jobs and many businesses going bankrupt. The U.S. government intervened with a series of measures and quantitative easing to stabilize the financial system. The collapse of the United States foreclosing housing bubble and high interest rates led to an unprecedented number of borrowers missing mortgage payments and becoming delinquent. Okay? So they had high housing prices then. They had extremely high interest rates then, by their standard. Oh, clicking on the wrong... Too many tabs! Look. We had really high interest rates, and then so many people were like, wow, houses are pretty affordable and stuff. Let's all go buy them. Driving down the interest rates, causing more houses to be built, increasing the price of houses. People stopped buying houses, driving interest rates more, until it all comes crashing down. Womp womp. At least the housing prices. If we noticed here, and that's a key thing, is that shortly after the housing crisis started to unfold on people, interest rates shot up here. They exploded up. Why did that happen? Well, as I mentioned before, interest rates go down when there's more loans being supplied in the market. Okay? And here, if people are foreclosing on their houses, we have less loans in the market, driving interest rates. So, they reverted it by giving out a bunch of money so people could go buy a bunch of properties. It's essentially what happened with the quantitative easing and things they were purchasing and whatnotness. And that's what we really have to ask ourselves here. When things start crashing, what are they going to do? How are they going to respond to this very obvious, big, ginormous bubble that they built themselves, almost intentionally? Are they going to just add more money to the supply so all these other people can buy up all this wealth and success in the market and purchase all these homes? Most likely. I mean, what else can they do? How can you say it's a bubble? How do you know these things? You're not an economist, you fool. True, I'm not. Never got a degree in it, never expertised in it. But I am intelligent enough to learn from the experts on how these things work, such as interest rates. We'll watch a little video here real quick on it.
An interest rate is the cost of borrowing money or the compensation for assuming the risks of lending money. Interest is a cost for one party and income for another. Regardless of the perspective, interest rates are always changing. An increase in demand for credit will raise interest rates.
By demand, they're not talking about, people demanding it and taking out the debt. They're talking about banks demanding it, mind you.
While a decrease will lower them. The more that banks can lend, the more credit that's available to an economy. And as the supply of credit increases, the price of borrowing, or interest, decreases.
Okay. So, the more credit, the more money banks have access to, such as, I don't know, COVID, such as COVID here, where we got this inflated amount of wealth being injected in the economy, it got us lower interest rates. And that's broadly speaking around a lot of things. And they do this on a general basis with repurchase agreements and reverse repurchase agreements. But we'll finish off this video a bit more here.
Credit decreases and interest rises when lenders don't repay their loans. If you skip paying this month's credit card bill, you increase the amount of interest you owe and decrease the amount of credit available.
Okay, so if people foreclose on their homes, interest rates go up because there's less debt in the market.
Another force is inflation. Higher inflation is likely to raise interest rates because lenders will want to make up for lost purchasing power.
Another thing that's happening these days is inflation.
Federal funds rate is the rate institutions charge each other for short-term loans. It affects the interest rates banks charge, and that trickles down into other short-term lending rates. The Fed influences these rates by buying or selling U.S. securities. When it
T-bills.
buys them, it injects banks with more money to lend, which decreases interest rates.
Repurchase agreements.
When it sells, banks have less money to lend, and interest rates rise.
Reverse repurchase agreements. Okay. So, increasing the amount of money that banks have access to in generally decreases interest rates because they have more money to have access to put out more debt. It's not because they have more money, it's because they are pushing out more debt to drop the interest rate. A greater supply in many ways. As the wise words of Isaac Newton put it, what goes up must come crashing and burning down to the ground. But how bad will it be? Will it be a recession or a depression? If we're lucky. God only knows. But if I had to give you any financial advice to young Zoomers, fellow Zoomers out there, is if you have the money right now, don't buy a house. Whatever you do, do not purchase a house. Do not take out the debt. These people live off of debt. They demand it, which is why interest rates are up, because the banks are demanding more debt because they don't have the proper supply of debt to keep the interest rates down. So don't give it to them. They don't deserve it. So I thought I'd go through this a little bit here because these are some economic issues I had complaints about based on a certain Matt Walsh's reaction about modernity and how young people should behave and what should they strive to be. And we're going to cover that here next. But I've been the King's Fool, and I hope you all have a good one.